I can hear you.
Trump is now president of the United States.
Why are men and boys struggling? And what should we do about it?
In a world of chaos and our attention is being pulled in different directions, the Pursuing Truth podcast is seeking the solution by having authentic conversations that are aimed to impact culture. Hello, everyone. I am Levi Brickley with the Pursuing Truth podcast, and this is another episode of the Real Talk radio show where I get to sit down and have awesome, authentic conversations with fellow guests on the show. And this week, I got to talk to Giulianna Ome with the Dear Lovers XO podcast. Please make sure that you follow and subscribe to the Dear Lovers XO podcast and the Pursuing Truth podcast on YouTube, Instagram, and give us a rating and review on Apple Podcast. Enjoy this episode with Giulianna.
Hi, I'm Giulianna Ome. Nice to meet you all. I'm 20 years old and I'm a certified life coach. Now, normally people will get all shocked at that, but I was born and raised in South America and I moved to the States about 3 years ago. So I have quite of a different kind of outlook on life. And so whenever I started the podcast, it kind of started a little bit off on the rough because a lot of people were giving me some hate for it. But like you said, we have to stay consistent with what we're doing, and my goals are to help people, and it's a pure goal, and I feel like God speaks to me through it. So that's my purpose for it. Thank you for having me on. I'm really excited to have this conversation.
Well, I'm excited that we worked this out the way we did, and it's been a couple weeks in the making, really. I mean, we've been talking about it and everything.
We have, and it's really exciting because we got a lot of people who have different opinions on the podcast too. So it's interesting kind of touching base with what people think and kind of seeing the core values from it. So I was excited when you reached out. I was like, oh, this is interesting.
Yeah, because I've heard this perspective on what does it mean to be a high value or low value man or woman. Oftentimes the perspective is, well, that's demeaning to me because I may not see myself as high value. And that's a potential fair assessment of yourself. Maybe you aren't everything that you could be. But the point is that we should always be striving to be the best version of ourselves. So it's a fair assessment to say, hey, you know what? That high value, that low value conversation doesn't feel and set right with me. There's this perspective that I was thinking about before we got going. And if you took, Giulianna, let me ask you this. If you took 3 men and all 3 of them looked the exact same, all of them had the same values. All of them had the same character. But the only difference is that one made $150,000 a year.
Oh, you stole it.
One made $100,000 a year, and the other one only made $50,000. But on every other level, they were the exact same. What would you go for naturally?
Man, I'm so jealous that you just stole my analogy of the day because I was going to make the same analogy, but a little bit different than yours. So obviously women are more prone to go for the man who has more money. This is just a way of life. As a guy is more prone to go for a woman who is more beautiful. And it's sad to look at it this way because it's kind of like a sort of trade, right? And values change over time. So men over time increase in value because they make more money, whereas women can decrease in value because your beauty doesn't last forever. And I hate putting it that way because personally I'm a woman, right? And I feel like it's offensive, but at the same time it's just something that is true. And this is why, and I bring it back around to, there's this book that's called Marry Him, Mr. Good Enough. And it's about this woman who's in her 30s who kind of had a strange way to go about the family life, a non-traditional way. She was looking for her husband and she was working, career driven. But then she said, you know what, I can't find a man right now, so I'll just get pregnant first. And so she went and she got herself pregnant, like artificially inseminated, and then realized how much of a struggle it is to have a kid on your own. And then went on the pursuit of finding another man to who would love her and her kid. So it's a really interesting book, but the gist of the book is how the value of women and men differ completely. It's totally different. So yeah, I mean, women would tend to go for the guy who has 100K more than the guy who has 50K. But to my analogy, I was going to say that, let's say I give you the same guy, same values, whatever, but one guy has learned how to hone his skills, right? And this other guy, the same guy in a different, like a parallel universe, if you will, is poor and is a bum, or is living in his mom's basement eating Cheetos. Okay. And he meets the same woman, and which woman is going to pick who? Is the woman who meets the Cheeto guy going to pick him, or is she going to pick the guy that makes essentially 100K? And obviously she's going to pick the guy who makes 100K, not because he's making 100K, but because money is also an interesting type of accomplishment. It's like a trophy for guys. You really, and for women as well, you make money, and it shows how much work you've put into getting that money. You know, it's not just, oh, I have money because, oh, my parents gave me money. No, it's because you've really put in dedication, and you've learned how to hone your skills into making a certain amount of money, X amount of money, in this case, 100. So money isn't because it's money, it's because you have proof of income and discipline.
It's proof that you may potentially be able to provide in harsh moments.
Right.
Money kind of provides that cushion. But throw this out here, because this is another aspect of being a high value man, is that he's able to protect.
Right.
Okay. So like, I was working in law enforcement for 5 years, and this conversation often kind of irritated me because of that, because obviously law enforcement officers, we don't make that much money, right? Like,
right.
We're literally throwing nickels and dimes for protecting.
To do some of the hardest work out there, which a lot of people don't want to do, and then you get treated like trash for it.
Yeah, and then at the end of the day, then I'm told, well, you're not high value because you're not making enough money. You see, but there's the other side to it, that like, law enforcement is a selfless job. Like, regardless of how you feel today, regardless of the hardships that you're facing in your personal life at any given moment in your life, you have to show up to work and set yourself aside for the betterment of that community. And
right.
there's a key aspect to that it's about sacrificing. So there's this other side to it. Yeah, I'm only making $45,000 a year in law enforcement, but I'm sacrificially serving my community. I'm being protective for the weak. That's
right.
what it is for law enforcement.
I think it shows your values too. I mean, a lot of guys who go into law enforcement have to really show their values. And it's funny because I just watched this video about all these girls talking about what their dream life would be. In fact, on Valentine's Day, when I went out with my friends, and it was Galentine's, one of my friends, she asked all of us, she was like, I want you to describe your favorite like idea of a husband or a man in your life. She went around asking everybody. And so when it came to her turn, I was like, I'll ask you. And I started asking her, and it was clear that she had written a list down at some point in her life of the type of qualities this man had to have, how he was supposed to look. Like, she'd written all this down in her mind, and she said, he's got to be this tall, he's got to be this attractive, he's got to make me laugh, he's got to be smart, work but not work too hard, and do this and not do this, and whatever. And I eventually kind of took it away from just the attributes of what she was saying. Like, she said, funny, charismatic, nice, loving, whatever, all these good attributes, right? And I kind of led it a different way. I asked her, okay, so in this hypothetical world, in your dream world, what's the house like? The house where you guys are living in? What is it like? And she described, this mansion. She described like a two-story house with 5+ bedrooms, his office, her office, sort of thing. And then I asked her how many cars would she have, and if she liked cars, if she wanted like high-end cars. And she was like, I don't really care about the car, but he'll give me something nice, sort of thing. And then I went on and I said, okay, so how many kids do you have? And she was like, I really haven't thought about it, like 3, 4, I don't know. And so it kind of went on into that sense. And I asked her, so how much a year would your ideal man have to be making? And she's like, I don't know, like 120K a year. And I'm like, dude, that's like 1%. That is less than 1%, actually, 0.1% of society. And she's 37. She looks like she's 22, which is awesome. But she's 37. And I asked her, so what age would this guy be? And she said anywhere from 27 to 37, 34, 30, whatever. And I was like, okay, so if we look at statistics, 0.1% of men make 150,000 a year. And usually that 1% that makes it is over 75. And if you wanted all the lavish life that you want, which is the house, the cars, the traveling, vacations every year, every month, anything like that, and you want him to be working all day but also be loving and kind and all this, I mean, what are the chances this man is also going to want you? What are the chances he's not going to want like the promiscuous lifestyle of just going and hanging out with all these models and all this stuff? Why would he want you? Why would he want to settle down with you? And it puts it into perspective. It's a sad, I don't mean to burst anybody's bubble, but it's true, And when you're a high value woman, I think, and when you're a high value man, you know what you want in life and you go for it. And money really isn't, money comes and goes. Money isn't something that a girl should say, oh, my potential husband should have 100,000 a year. If you're making 45,000, that's enough to live on. In fact, most men make 45,000. That's what you make yearly, and that's enough money to live a very comfortable lifestyle.
Right.
And both men and women have to be willing to take risks. And getting married with only $45,000 a year can be a risk, but it doesn't mean that lifestyle isn't going to be fruitful or loving and have amazing outcomes to it.
And understand what is your geographical area, what's the economy like, where you're actually at, because for instance,
figure out where you want to go with it.
Where I live, the average household medium income for my community is $50,000. So if a single man is making $50,000 on his own, he's already making as much as a family of four is making in his community. So that $50,000 is actually high value. That says a lot about that man within that community.
You put it into perspective,
right?
For sure. And also, you also have to add in that most women nowadays aren't only going to be like housewives. They want the ability to bring in money. They just don't want, I think. And Jordan Peterson talks about this a lot, about how women really don't want to be working like men work, because men are very business oriented. Right. And this is a masculine trait, which is totally fine. Women and men will have masculine traits, and men would have some feminine traits, and that's totally fine. But usually women, what makes women happy is to a fulfilling life is to take care of your children, but also women nowadays will want to bring in a certain amount of money to the household. So say you're making 50,000 and your wife, the lady that you marry eventually, she makes like another 45,000. That's enough to live a very comfortable life. It's not something that you're going to be afraid of. And again, another quality of being a high quality man or woman or just a person is persevering through difficult times. And my motto, not only for the podcast, but everything in life, is be your best self, but do it even if you're afraid to actually,
absolutely
do anything despite your fear, because fear never leaves you and you will learn to become used to it. And to quote Dune, fear is the mind killer. The full quote is, I have no fear, for fear is the little death that kills me over and over again. Without fear, I die but once. So we have to shed that fear. That emotion of fear.
It's like going into war, right? Like the warrior.
This is the red zone.
Yeah, the warrior doesn't always feel like, oh man, this is going to go great as I go into war. He knows that there's a potential he could lose his life. So there's natural fear there. But it's about the courage to go into that war, into that battle, and show up every day, even when you don't feel like it. Just go do it.
And it's not about your mood. This is another thing. Actually, Dennis Prager talked about this on Daily Wire. It was really interesting. It's not about your mood. If you're not in the mood to do something, you still have to do it. You get up every day and you go to work. You get up every day and you go to battle. If you're in the red zone, and this is the first thing that you learn in anything that has to do law enforcement or even in the military, they teach you to be in the red zone. How are you going to react to the red zone, right? You have to be cool, calm, and collected to be able to function in that. Because if you're like a blubbering mess, you can't really function in it.
Going to die. You're going to die if you're like that.
They will eliminate you.
Yeah. That's one thing that I had to learn. One thing I did want to touch on too is this conversation about high value, low value. To put it into perspective, there is a hierarchical structure here of men or women that may potentially be of higher value than we are individually. But understanding that in the midst of this conversation is at a general essence of how do we develop as a higher value person. Let's not victimize ourselves to the idea that the idea that, oh, because somebody might potentially be more higher value than I am, that this is
Yeah.
a problem. This discussion is needed to have. We need to have discussions like this, because this discussion right here is the one that says, oh, wow, okay, I need some direction in my life. I need to find where to go, and I need
Right.
to find out how to get there. And what the first thing is examining that. What is it to be that high value person? So
Right.
what would it mean to be a high value woman then? What would be some characteristics of a high value woman?
Okay, so personally, I mean, we all have different definitions of high value, right? But my definition of high value is, of a woman. She's a woman who knows her value and wants people in her life who value her and who hold her up to that standard that she holds herself up to, and she owns, loves, and respects herself, and she knows her life is abundant because Jesus chose her. Proverbs 31 does not describe a woman who has like a spotless house or with with perfectly behaved children wearing the matching designer outfits. Like,
Right.
honestly, not even a woman who's married or has children. These words describe a woman who honors God by seeking him in everything that she does and trusting him wholeheartedly with her life. She has a heart of reverence that overflows into a spiritual maturity and wisdom. And she's not born this way. Again, going back to people aren't born this way. You get there by a process of refinement, which is a work that specifically like the Holy Spirit does in all of us. So that's what a high value woman is, I think. What is a high value woman for you in your perspective?
See, and I think that's always a fair question, is to throw it back at the man, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
and no, it's fair, because what I think a high value man is may not be what a woman thinks a high value man is. So I appreciate that getting thrown back at me. What I think is a high value woman is a woman that knows her position with God. I mean, truly, if she knows her position with God, then she can potentially understand her position with me in a relationship within marriage.
Right.
Because when I look at marriage, as a triangle. Both her and I are on this same level, and we're trying to submit at all times our marriage to God.
To God.
And everything that we do is to honor him. So if her value is within God, then that automatically makes her a high value woman in my mind. For me, and this is controversial, but I don't need a woman that works. I don't need a woman that makes a ton of money. I'm not a boy that needs a woman to come in and clean my house. I've lived alone for nearly 8 years. I don't need that. Those things
Right.
are benefits. Those things add to that potential relationship that I could be in with that woman. But a woman who can also show empathy and compassion towards me, but not have so much proclivity to empathy and compassion that it turns into being naive, because we need to understand the enemy in front of us. So I also need a woman that would be submissive, okay, and not necessarily.
Right.
And that sounds terrible, but not
I
so
think
much
there's I think there's a
submissive.
bad connotation around submission. Personally, I think
Yeah,
that when people hear submission, they think Middle Eastern women who will get burned. Their faces will get burned off if they don't do what their husband wants. That's the type of submission that people think of when you hear submission, and that's not the Christian type of submission, because also in the Bible it talks about how if you read the whole verse of wives submit to your husbands, it says, and husbands you shall submit to your wives. It's not just like
absolutely.
it's Jesus died for the church sort of situation,
Right,
and
because we're
in this
submitting to the
metaphor
honor of
women are the
God.
church, and you men have to kind of get to the level of Jesus, and that's the actually I think that's a much better person that you should be looking up to, rather than like, for say, Andrew Tate. We hear a lot of young kids looking up to Andrew Tate and
Right.
seeing all the flamboyant lifestyle that he lives and all the awesome cars and all the women and all that. But I want to touch on something about what you said before about a woman, and it's extremely important to be complete on your own. before entering a relationship.
Right.
And the reason why you're not looking for a woman who cleans your house or does this for you or does that for you is because you're perfectly able to do that, because you're complete on your own. A lot of incomplete men and incomplete women out there expect their partner to fill the void of what they don't have. And this is what I tell a lot of my clients whenever I have to help them through something emotionally with relationships is I say, just write down the character qualities or the attributes that you'd want in a person, and then you try and become that. And it's like looking at the Bible as well, just looking at how Jesus was as a man. And there's so many things that as a woman I can take from how to become like Jesus, because that's what we are as Christians. We're showing Jesus' light through us. And as a man, it's a lot of pressure, and you have to not be able to bend through it. So that's why I think it's also just extremely important to be one on your own and then join forces with somebody else, because I look at a relationship like a ladder without rungs. I've said this many times to many people, and it's like the two little pieces of wood there, and you guys have each other's back in the rungs, and you've got you build up and you go up one ladder and he goes up the other, and it goes back and forth like that, and you guys are adding to each other's lives. It's not just taking away value or making somebody feel a certain way. You're holding each other accountable because you're an entire person on your own already.
I want to go back to submission as well and just provide my perspective on that. When I say submission, it's definitely not about a woman that needs this man that's domineering, or that I would be domineering to my woman. It's that I believe that I have a responsibility to lead the home spiritually and emotionally. And if I am in the midst of chaos, in the midst of hardship within that relationship, I mean, shoot, bring in something that could be the absolute worst situation, like losing a child. Right. I got to hold it together as a man, because I saw my mom when we lost my brother. I saw her basically check out. Well, me as a man, I got to lead in that situation. I got to hold things together, even if it's hard for me. I think that's part of the perspective of stoicism that's so important. Is like as we suffer, we remain stoic. We go through it.
My favorite story from the archipelago, the Gulag archipelago. No one ever said this, but my favorite story from there is the story of this man who was sentenced to die. And he wanted to see his wife one last time. And the guard said, yeah, we can arrange that, but you can't tell her that you're going to die. You can't tell her. So they get the wife there. He agrees to it, and they get the wife there, and he spends 3 glorious days with his wife. They walk around, they talk, they have fun, they reminisce about the old times and all that. And then the day that she's going off in a boat, and he waves goodbye and whatever, he starts getting undressed because he's going to die. And there's a certain beauty to stoicism. I think a lot of men have been encouraged to, give into your emotions. And sure, there are moments for that. There are moments where you can become vulnerable, because that's what a relationship is about, right? It's not being, I'm all strong, or I can do it. No, because I would imagine in a situation where you lose like your child, a husband and a wife loses their child, you kind of have to be there to support each other, because it's not just the loss of a mother who's very emotional. It's also the loss of a father and the child, and so the father has to be as an emotional support to the mother as the mother has to be to the father. It's the beautiful symbiotic relationship of men and women, because men are different and women are different. And to the relationship, you bring something unique. Women bring their femininity, men bring their masculinity. And some women may have some masculine traits. And this is something that Jordan Peterson talks about a lot. He talks about how you want somebody who you can contend with. You don't want to be in a relationship with somebody who's just going to say, yes, master. Yes, master. No,
it would be boring.
Do that.
It would be boring relationship.
You want somebody to contend with you, because you're gonna be fighting things through, and you're gonna have to figure out what you need in life. And there are gonna be situations that are thrown at you that you personally won't know how to handle, and your wife, because she has a different perspective, will know how to handle, because she's a woman, because women tend to mature faster than men, and men take a little bit longer, and it's totally fine. But there's that line between men and women, and that's what makes a relationship between a man and a woman. So beautiful and symbiotic.
And I heard this perspective earlier of what does it take for a man to grow up? Because the reality is there's a lot of 30-year-old boys that are running around in culture right now. But we've lived such a sheltered life in America, especially, where everything has been handed to us. Everything's been easily attainable. And some of us have never had to experience true hardship. And none of us, you know, I kind of heard your perspective on TikTok Live the other day of like living vicariously through somebody else and kind of like how you can pull from that. But that's not very popular. Many people don't even have any interest in other people's lives to begin to live vicariously through somebody else. So that's a rarity. And there's some people that can do that. But other people, they have to experience so much hardship that says to them, man, I got to change. Things got to get hard enough where it's like, oh, I got to get my life in order.
Right. When it gets hard enough, you're just going to have to change. At one point, when you hit rock bottom, you're just going to have to want to change. And I really like this one quote. It goes, hard times create strong men, and strong men create good times, and good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times. So, and it really does apply to society nowadays where you know, hard times created strong men for America, and America is one of the best countries. I mean, it is the best country. It's the most courageous, the most giving. You know, it goes on. And strong men created good times here, and now good times have created weak men, and weak men are creating hard times now. So we kind of have to get out of that brain fart, I guess, right now, where everybody's weak and we all are afraid of speaking our minds. And I think that's where parents kind of come in. You know, parents come in there and they arm their children. And you and I spoke about this a little bit before. And the reason why I think I was able to learn vicariously, or be able to even contemplate learning vicariously, it was because my parents were always so open with me about their mistakes and their decisions in life. They never hid anything from me. They never tried to say, oh, yeah, don't do this because I'm telling you not to do this. They would always give me a clear example of what happened. And I would be able to see the domino effect taking place when they were telling me the story. Because, you know, when somebody's telling you a story, it's captivating. You want to know the end of it. And so when my parents would tell me something personal about their lives, and they were like, I don't think you should do this because of this. And I see a lot of parents nowadays doing the opposite. You know, they are so afraid of their past. They don't want to tell their children about their past, or even their significant other about their past, because it's so embarrassing. And as Christians, when you become a Christian, you're not going to sin anymore. It's not like you're living a beautiful life from then on out. No, it's struggle. There's struggle, man, and it gets tough, and you're going to go through really tough times. You're going to go through really hard times. But again, those hard times create strong men and women in this situation. But I mean, dude, you've got to be able to do that, because be open with your kids, be open with your loved ones.
Because if you shelter your children from the storm, the shelter that you hold them in creates a environment where they will never learn how to weather the storm alone. Yeah. So you got to be open with children and tell them, hey, this is what's going on in life. That way they can learn from it without having to experience it. And there's naturally...
Don't let the school do it. Don't let your schools take the responsibility of like sex ed. Don't let your schools take responsibility of any other important things that your kids should be learning. You should be able to put on the full armor of God and put that on them as well. Because if you shelter your kids from, let's say there's a snake out in the yard, and you just don't tell them there's a snake, it reminds me of a video where I saw Jordan Peterson talking about this. He said, imagine that there's a beast outside, and you see the beast, you're at a friend's house and you see the beast, and then you go back inside and your friend says, I'm going to go outside. And you just don't tell your friend that there's a beast out there, and they get stung or bit or whatever. It's whose fault is it? It's your fault. You didn't let them know that what was out there. And so you just have to be able to put the armor of God on, and then put that on your children as well.
Let's take a little turn here. How can a Christian woman navigate a world of sexualization, of physicality, and how can modesty increase her value?
I get this question a lot because there are a lot of women out there who are being sexualized, but it's not only because they're being sexualized, it's because women are always going to be sexualized. Women are
Right.
always going to be sexualized, no matter what. No matter if you're like in the Middle East covering up and you have your burqa and everything's covered up, you're still going to be sexualized. Okay? In today's society, access to porn is just so, it's prevalent. It's easy to access. And even on Instagram, you can just, guys who follow all these girls who are just showing their ass, just guys nowadays have seen more than any man in the past has ever seen. And it's insane. It's just
Because of
like,
pornography.
click on your phone, and I think it all comes down to really analyzing what your own problem is, because you can't really put it on a whole gender to say, cover yourself up completely so nobody sees, because men are still gonna be tempted. That's just how it is. So
We're
as a
going to
woman,
imagine it.
Go ahead.
Absolutely. We're going to imagine it. Absolutely. We do
Yeah.
it with waitresses. We do it with the woman that walks next to us. And I'm not quite sure why we do that.
Men
Maybe
are more
it's
visual. Men are just more visual. That's just how men are. And women tend to read porn rather than watch porn.
right.
They like the fantasy.
The 50 Shades of Grey.
This is what I was talking to you about. Remember
Yeah.
when we were on the phone call and I said, it's really interesting how all the women jumped when 50 Shades of Grey came out, because it was the
Right.
fantasy of a high value man, right? But it was really interesting in the sense that that's not a thing. And I think also like feminists have Western feminism has killed the masculinization. So they're trying to make up domineering men who are abusive of women and sexualize them constantly to be the norm. And there's a huge difference, by the way, between third wave feminism and first wave feminism. And first wave feminism, women who fought for that are probably rolling in their graves right now, because that's not what they fought for. They didn't fight for, all of this third wave feminism, which is, aborting babies and trying to become essentially men rather than embracing their femininity.
Yeah,
the aspects of being a woman.
they were fighting for voting rights. They weren't trying to destroy men. They weren't like, yeah, there was a patriarchal structure of society at the time where there were men that controlled every aspect of life essentially. I
like asking women who say, "Oh, it's the patriarchy." Who got you out of that? Because a woman nowadays can do anything, pretty much anything. At least in Western society, can pretty much do anything. There are no barriers stopping you.
And this
unless
is
it's
extreme.
like a physical ailment, like a disability or something. But there's nothing stopping you. And who got you out of there? Men voted you out of there. Men actually passed the vote, so women would be able to own property, so women would be able to be have human rights. It's not women who did all the marching.
Right.
Yeah, women did all the marching, but no women was in Congress when that
this
happened.
This is one thing that I often stand up against, is that we put people in silos. And what I mean by that is we generalize by the sex, we generalize by the by the group identity. We generalize so much that we don't look at people as individuals, and we take away that individuality. There were men that stood against the patriarchal structure. There were men that honored their wives within the home. They weren't just sitting there every day when they got home from work, when they were stressed out, beating their wives. That's not the reality. There were individuals that were different.
Keying in on the outliers. I think a lot of people just like keying in on the outliers. That's society. Society is based on the generalizations, the norm. That's how society is supposed to be.
Well, we're structured with empathy and compassion for the minority. We're always structured with the minority and compassion for the minority. Look at participation trophies. That's the reason why people get participation trophies. Okay?
Yeah.
Because we don't want to give the first 3 places in a race a ribbon. We have to make the kid that got 49th place feel good as well.
Feel good.
When the reality is, that's not the way life works.
it doesn't feel good even getting a participation trophy nowadays, because it's just a participation trophy. There's no point to a trophy at all, which it really does diminish and desensitize people to pursuing actual trophies, actual goals, and saying, oh, I want to be number one because there's a trophy at the end. That's why we started the whole trophy things before. It was because you start the incentivizing of a child by the trophy, and they want the trophy because it's shiny and gold, it looks pretty, and so that's what makes them work hard to get to the trophy. But now there's no point in getting a trophy because everybody gets one, so nobody works hard.
And you look at the workforce now too. You have people that are coming out of college with a bachelor's or a master's degree. They're going into the workforce and they're like, well, I deserve an extra $20,000 a year since I got a degree. Well, I deserve X, Y, and Z as a benefit to my job because of my degree. They walk into it with a sense of arrogance, yet they have not proven their work ethic. And at the end of the day, we need the work ethic within the workforce, and we need creativity within the workforce. And if you have not proven yourself, the degree says nothing. It's just a piece of paper that says that you spent some time in a classroom and you learned from a professor, but you didn't get your boots on the ground. You don't have experience dealing with it. So this whole idea, this whole thing of creating this culture as we all deserve something even though we don't necessarily deserve it, says,
I think it's
wow, that's a collapse.
The whole street smart and school smart sort of situation, right? But also, I think we can circle this back to how both men and women who are considered high value work on a personal level to develop themselves, right?
Right.
And if you go to college, actually, some of the most dumb people I know have gone to college, and it sucks because college doesn't teach you how to think critically anymore. It teaches you what you should be thinking and indoctrinates you. And
boom,
it sucks.
It's so true, though.
It sucks because my dad got a better education than kids nowadays are getting. And he had to pay less for it. He wasn't in college debt for years and years like a lot of these kids are going to be because of the name of Harvard or Yale or this and that. Some of the dumbest people go to Harvard. It sucks. It really sucks because there are really smart people out there who get diminished because they didn't go to college, because they didn't take the traditional
I'm one
way.
of those people.
Personally, I'm one of those people too. I didn't want to go to college. I planned on becoming a physical therapist. Actually, you know what? I was one of those kids who couldn't really decide what I wanted to be because I wanted to be everything and anything at any point. Like one day I was introduced to astronauts. I was like, I want to be an astronaut. And then the next day I was like, oh, veterinarian? I want to be a veterinarian. So I couldn't choose. But what I did know was that I was able to pick up on things really quickly. And so if I did enough reading, if I could know my way around certain things and maybe not become a professional at it, which made me kind of like a jack of all trades, which is good to an extent. You always have to specialize in something.
But being an expert at something doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from that initial conversation that we were having. You continue to show up, and over time you become an expert at it.
Right.
And I never went.
A jack of all trades is a master of none, but oftentimes better than a master of one. That's the full one. That's the full
right.
quote.
And people miss that last part.
They miss the last part because they say a jack of all trades is a master of none, period. But a jack of all trades is a master of none, but oftentimes better than a master of one. And this is, I think, goes into the whole high value men and women, because if you are able to, hit the ground running, and this is street smart and school smart, and you mix those two together, there's a nice balance between there. And I think high value men are able to, be a plumber one day and then be an electrician the other day, and then you do all this. And a high value woman has to be a mother, and then has to help her children through this, and has to do this. There's so many things that are involved in just being a woman and just being a man, that being a jack of all trades is pretty much better than being a master of just one.
So one thing I want to hit on too is, for men, oftentimes one of our biggest struggles is that we are prideful. Right. We carry a lot of ego and a lot of confidence hidden in that ego. False confidence is always hidden in ego.
Overcompensation.
And we often fail to be humble. And I think for us men, we need to recognize where we need to be humble, because Humility says, I don't have it all figured out. But a good man, and this is the key thing to a man's true value, I think, within the world. A high value man has the ability to influence others because he's a leader. High value men are leaders, but they only do that through knowing their inadequacies to find other people to develop a community to bring alongside him for the benefit of that community. But he has to understand where he is inadequate to seek out those other people. And if he lives with ego, if he's overly confident, if he's overly prideful, he fails to see the gifts of others to give them value within this world as well. I think that's
Right.
key for a man's value.
Right. That is key. And it's funny because a lot of the things that have to do with high value men or high value women really apply to both sexes, in the sense that, you kind of have to know your own flaws, and you have to know what your weaknesses are to be able to carry a successful life, or even a successful mentality in life. And it's really interesting because a lot of women are more emotional than men are. Well, this is actually
Right.
Women are just more emotional than men are, and men are more critical thinkers. And to talk about pride in relationship, I think it's good to be confident. There is a thin line between confidence and
Arrogance.
just arrogance. Yeah, there is a really thin line. And I think a lot of the times when men overcompensate or think, oh, I'm just going to act really, really cool, and I'm just going to pretend like I have all these other things on my list that I've done, it doesn't really show your character, because when you're confident, you're humble. There's a certain humility to being confident. You hold yourself to a certain standard, but you know that you're weak in certain aspects and that you need to work on those more. And that's what creates a high value person, is to actually work on those things rather than just saying, yeah, you know what, screw it, I'm not going to do that. And, that's a really weak out to that.
Confidence is developed through a series of proven actions. It's not something where you just, it's like this idea these days of people saying, well, just tell yourself that you're great at it, and you are great at it. Well, that's not necessarily true either.
Yeah, just
Right.
like believe it and you become it, sort of.
Speaking it into existence, you don't speak confidence into existence. Confidence.
Although, you know what, I might differ with you on that, because I do believe that there's a certain brainwashing that you do when you speak to yourself. A lot of the things that we think are about ourselves, the subconscious thought process, the self-talk, it is really affecting people in general. And I take it from the Bible as God spoke the world into existence. I do believe that if you call yourself stupid and ugly, you will see yourself stupid and ugly.
Right.
In fact, there are studies that show people who do this over a certain amount of time, they start becoming that. You can start seeing their faces become distorted, and I think there's a clear difference between what a low value person is.
Right.
Low value men or women are passionate about things, goals and dreams that either add no value to their lives or that lie outside of their control. A typical example is, being so passionate about a team as to merge your own ego and pride with that team.
Yeah, self-talk is extremely important. You can't just speak it into existence without action. Everything that you do takes action. And that's part of being a valuable person, is that you're taking action in your life. You're not just a floaty on the ocean, just taking the waves as they come. You got a motor in the water, and you're running. You're going towards a direction. You're not
That's
just
funny,
wading through the water.
because it reminds me of, I don't know why I wiggled this up, but it reminds me of, that story reminds me of this. I'm not sure if it was an anecdote or if it actually happened or what it is, but my dad once told me when I was younger, he said there was once this man who whose house was overflooded, and it eventually got to the point where you couldn't see any houses at all. It was just him on his roof with his dog. And he said, Lord, help me, get me out of here. And then this helicopter just like flies by, and the guy at the top says, hey, get down, come on, jump on the ladder, and we'll take care of you. And then the guy who's on the house, let's just name him Levi for reference. So let's say Levi is on the roof, and he says, no, God is going to help me. I don't need you guys. God's going to help me. And so the helicopter goes by, and so it's like, what a weirdo. And then next comes a boat. A boat comes by and says, hey, jump on the boat, we'll take care of you. And then the guy's like, Levi says, nah, man, just take my dog. And then he's stuck on the roof. And he prays again, Lord, help me. And then this little raft, like empty raft, goes by, or a door or something. Think from Titanic, And and he's like, oh, that's weird. And he just lets it go by. And then he looks up and says, Lord, why didn't you help me? Why didn't you give me a way out? There were multiple ways out, but you weren't open to seeing them. So you weren't open to the idea of helping yourself. You can do all the praying, but with all the praying and no action, you're going to miss your bus, man. You're going to miss your opportunity.
A life without action is a life that's meaningless. And what I mean by that is, like, if you're not taking action in your life, then you're not going to feel any purpose. A man that sits in his bedroom all day and plays video games, he doesn't go out and interact with the world, or he's not putting together some type of career. The problem is that man is not going to feel fulfilled in his life. He's going to feel like he's waking up every day and it's completely meaningless. And you want to be, if you want to be a high value man to women, it's important that you determine what that meaning is, why you wake up every morning. And this is the thing, going back to our initial conversation about podcasting at a general essence, I've recognized through it is that there's many women that don't accept me for what I do here on the podcast. Like, people naturally have a tendency not to come towards me because they realize, well, my life is behind a camera and a microphone oftentimes. And there may be some idea that there isn't going to be privacy in the relationship because of that, or that's just not something that they're interested in. But here's a key element to finding what type of person you want in your life, is because women will tend to not come towards me because this is what I do with my free time. Well, is that a woman that I want? No, I want to attract the type of woman that I need in my life that understands why this is important to me.
Right.
And so when you find that meaning, when you wake up in the morning and you're like, man, I got something, a reason for being. I got a reason to wake up in the morning. When you have that, you attract the type of person that you ultimately want in life. And so, like, yeah, there's people that don't want me because this is what I do. But at the end of the day, I don't want that person that doesn't want this for me either.
Right. And I think it goes both ways. Somebody who you meet is going to support you as much as you're going to support them in their dreams and their goals. Because, like I said at the beginning of this episode, a lot of these high value man, high value woman qualities pertain to both genders. It's not just for men or just for women. This applies to both. If you're a girl and you wake up and you feel like you have no purpose in life, you really need to read the Bible. You need to find your identity in Christ. And it's important for everybody, every human being, to have a purpose. And I think that's one of the reasons why there's such a huge increase in depression and suicide, is because you don't feel like you have a purpose. And this was something that I felt like very culturally shocking when I moved to the States, was the fact that people tend to do this self-isolation, and you feel like nobody sees you. Nobody wants to talk to you. Nobody makes the first step to talk to you. If you want to have friends, you have to be very intentional with the pursuit of your friends. You have to be very intentional with the pursuit of a relationship. A lot of people don't even feel the need to pursue relationships or friendships or any type of relationship at this point, which is really sad. And I think they get caught up in this whole self-love movement. There is a point where you need to really love yourself and appreciate who you are, but I don't think that becoming egotistical in it will help you in the long run. It'll just make you feel lonely. And this is what I was talking to a lot of the guys on my TikTok live the other night, was that, sure, I mean, if you're into the whole promiscuous lifestyle, you'll see, like, you can live that life. In fact, I encourage both girls and guys, if you feel like you need to live that promiscuous lifestyle, go and do it. Try it both ways. Try and live it this way, and then try and live it that way, and tell me which one made you feel more fulfilled. Because I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure that when you pursue that promiscuous lifestyle, when you're trying to fill a Jesus Christ hole in your heart with sex, drugs, alcohol, whatever it may be, porn. There's so many drugs that are just at our fingertips. Even using your phone can be addictive, being constantly on social media, being constantly on video games or whatever. Those all become idols, and you yourself may become an idol in your own life. So you really have to check it. You really have to check your mental state when you're feeling down and what's making you feel down. And this goes back to emotional intelligence. Both men and women need emotional intelligence to be in a relationship. It's not just like a one way sort of thing where men have to be emotionally intelligent, where women have to be like crazy, you know? No, there's certain things that we both have to bring to it in a relationship to be able to support each other's goals and dreams. And if, like in your situation, you were saying somebody doesn't really want to be with me because I have a podcast, that person isn't for you, and God has been saving somebody for you, and you have to work on yourself. And this is what I tell girls and guys. The only way you're going to find a good relationship is if you're constantly working on yourself, you're focusing on your goals, your dreams. And sometimes it can be really, you can lose yourself in a relationship. Like, there's so many young girls out there, young women who go into relationships looking for value, validation, and they think that the only resource of validation is by having sex with a guy, when in reality you're giving up something that is so precious, something that
And
is
and
that is meant. And this is both for guys and women, because I know men who are in their 30s who are still virgins and think that that is something worth waiting for. In fact, I
and
think
it
I
is.
can share the story. Sorry, I just want to go on real quick. I think I can share the story of my dad when I was younger. It was like a turning point in my life when I was just talking with my dad about my mom and all this, and he said, Julie, I really wish I had waited for your mother. And it was like a mic drop moment where I realized, I was like, my dad really wished his wife had been his first. And I know a lot of people feel that way. So just stick to it, man.
Yeah, you decrease in your emotional availability the more that you're involved in hookup culture. And I think an
For sure.
important internal question for somebody who is currently involved in hookup culture, or somebody who has been reflecting recently on their life, is to ask yourself, was I truly happy while I was out sleeping around?
Yeah.
Because I've been a person that was involved in hookup culture, and it was just like meaningless, just emotionally draining, that fulfilled me in no way. And it's a constant struggle, because I've been in many relationships where obviously we weren't sexually abstinent, and when we broke up, it was much harder for me because I didn't preserve that intimacy for the moment where we were fully committed to each other within marriage. And then so what that led for me was heartbreak. And then
Right.
especially as a man, there's this other struggle of like thinking of her sexually afterwards and wishing that I was still involved in those sexual actions with her. And then I have to get over that, as well as getting over the emotional distraught state that I'm in because she's no longer with me. So
Right.
like
And
sex.
actually, I want to touch on that real quick, because I think that that's another way that people kind of push themselves or make themselves stay in toxic relationships, because of the sex. Because and for some women, I've heard a lot of stories from like girlfriends of mine who've said, I just try to stick it out with this guy, even though I knew he was toxic and everything, because it was just great sex. It's just great sex. And so you start making excuses for that person because you're becoming one. What is sex? Sex is something beautiful. I'm not trying to be a prude and say, no, guys, don't ever have sex. Sex is supposed to be something beautiful. It's supposed to be something that you both treasure, and you guys aren't becoming desensitized throughout years and years of watching TV shows like Euphoria or things like porn or whatever. There's a certain, it's very insidious. What's going on in today's day and age in society is just very insidious. I see it all the time. It's this constant spiritual warfare on sex and on women and on men, because we are of God. God has chosen us. And it's really, I get so passionate about it because it makes me sad seeing people throwing their lives away, throwing their potential away. And because we all have that potential. We all have that potential to become our best selves. And there's a clear crossroads. When you come down to that crossroad, you have to see, okay, am I gonna go hookup culture way and live this way, or am I gonna go this way where I can commit to a relationship? And it's just very important to ask yourself those questions. Is this fulfilling to me? Am I just doing this out of trying to fill a void in my heart,
And then,
or am I doing this to help others, or whatever that,
and then,
that question may
so
be.
the question would be, what gives something value? What gives something value is scarcity, right? Like gold.
Yeah.
Like gold is extremely hard to find. It's a rare metal. It's conductive to electricity. It's beautiful. Everybody wants it. And it's something that holds our economy together, but it's because it's scarce. So
Right.
if you're out in hookup culture and you're hooking up with random people all the time and giving away the most intimate part of you, then what makes you valuable to the man or the woman?
Or the woman, yeah. You can't be a hypocrite either, right? Because I come across a lot of guys that send me DMs and like they'll say, yeah, I want this type of woman, and let's just say for sakes, I want a virgin, and then they themselves are like participating in orgies or whatever. Like, man, you are such a hypocrite. You are so hypocritical. Like take that out of your eye. It's like if your right eye causes you to stumble, and this is what I wanted to talk about with like modesty, is that if your right eye as a man causes you to stumble, and Jesus said this multiple times throughout it all, he said, if your right eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to stumble, then cut it off and throw it away, for it is better to lose this entire part of your limb than to go to hell. And he says this multiple times in different versions. He says it in Matthew, chapter 5, or Matthew chapter 8. He goes on and says it. I think that's something important to address, because you've got to get the log out of your own eye before you go around expecting certain things from other people, which is why I go back into, if you want something in a person, write it down. What are the attributes that you want? And then you become those. Try and become those. It takes insane amounts of effort to become what you want in a partner.
Well, there's also this, I think we see this a lot with being transgender. A lot of people find identity in their temptations.
Yeah.
And the reality is that we're all tempted in different areas. Just because I'm tempted to sleep with a woman, or just because you're tempted to steal something, whatever it may be, that's not necessarily your identity. Temptation is a feeling like, I kind of want to do this, and I want to do it, but at the end of the day, if you make the decision, then that's what makes you who you are, because you're falling into the temptation. But the temptation itself isn't who you are. It's based in action. Coming back to that self-talk, everything is based in action. And I love the Bible story of Joseph, because the Bible story of Joseph is all about integrity. What you say and what you do is who you are. So it's two, and you can't leave one out without the other. Both of them go hand in hand. Just because you say something and you don't do it, well, now you're a hypocrite. Yeah. Well, if you do something and you've never even examined it and had the self-talk within yourself or somebody else, then you're doing it meaninglessly. What's the reason why you're doing it?
There has to be intention to it, is what you're saying.
And everything
Right.
in life requires intention. So you want to increase your value, man or woman, be intentional, ultimately.
Be intentional. That's true. That's true about anything. And like I was saying, with relationships, friendships, or romantic relationships, you have to be intentional. And it's funny because people will go into hookup culture with knowing that it's meaningless. But why would you expect? Why do you get yourself so hurt? Why do you think you become hurt by the occurrences that happen afterwards? If you knew it was meaningless, it's because we're created. We're hardwired as humans. We are hardwired to want something that's long term, something that has longevity to it, especially in relationships. So you don't want something that comes and goes. And it's important to be intentional with it. I think a lot of people go into relationships and say, this relationship's just for fun. So what's the intention with fun? What's the end goal with that? There's no end goal. There is no end goal. You both are going to hurt each other. You know it. And that's what it's going to end up in. And it goes back to how low value women or men are passionate about things that don't add value to their lives. And going to the point of transgenderism, I remember, or even, homosexuality. It's like people who are gay or lesbians or transgender or whatever, they're like vegans. They can't keep it to themselves. They can't. They're like, I'm a vegan. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like they just can't keep it to themselves. It's just part of their identity. It's just so ingrained. They make it so. This is just who I am. I am just this. And no, you're not just that. There's so much more to you. You're so much more intricate than just how you like to have sex. There's just so much more to you. Why would you even want to associate yourself with something so sexual, just so base nature? What are you, a bunny? You just go outside and screw another bunny and that's it? Like, even pertaining to hookup culture, why would you say like sex is so important? Yes, I mean, sex is important within the confines of a marriage where you have somebody who can support you and who you are willing to support. I mean, I'm not saying marriage is like a fairy tale or anything. It entails a lot of struggles, and there are a lot of things that you have to be mentally prepared for. And sometimes some of the things you're not even mentally prepared for. And that's kind of the beauty of being in a relationship with somebody. I tell this to a lot of people who are cynics, who are jaded, who become completely jaded by romance or love. And they think, no, all women are trash or all men are trash. No, you were just in a relationship with the wrong person. And now what you're doing by becoming so jaded or such a cynic is that you are cutting yourself off from having any future opportunities with somebody else.
I hate the perspective, and I mean that word. I hate the perspective of all women are this, all men are that. Again, yeah. It's a generalization, and it doesn't allow a person to be who they truly are. So, how would a high-value person, man or woman, find a partner that's also high value?
Well, where are you going? Are you going to bars to find yourself a girlfriend? Like, are you going to like a strip club trying to find yourself a wife? Like, what are you doing? Where are you putting yourself? This goes to both men and women. Who are you choosing to be friends with? Who are you choosing to invest valuable time and effort in? If I usually recommend people either go to church. If you feel led to go to church, join a college group or a group, anything like that. And start meeting people through there, start making acquaintances. If you're not, I don't want to shove my religion down your throat, right? So if you're not really engaged in a relationship with God, go to a library, or sign up for a class, sign up for a certain study, something that you like, that you find interesting. Or if you're in the age, or if you're within the age range of college, just go and frequent college areas, and you'll meet a bunch of girls there, a bunch of guys there who are willing to start a relationship, but also be very intentional, be very direct with the things that you want. I remember, I have a funny anecdote about this. I was like with my first boyfriend ever. I went into that relationship. He said, "Do you want to be my girlfriend?" This is 15-year-old Juliana, 14 Juliana, she was like, okay, so just by the way, there will be no sex involved. We will just hold hands. Maybe we might kiss, but that's about it. No touching involved. Like I was very direct with what I wanted. And I said, and if you choose to cheat on me, that is totally okay. I will find out and I will dump your ass. And then I will move on.
Yeah.
And that was my intention with it. That was how I was being in my juvenile, naive way, being intentional with my relationship, because I knew that I was going to hold myself to a standard and I was not going to give in. I was like, nope, this is what I want. If you're not good with that, then we can move on and we can just be friends and go our separate ways. And I
Did you live to it?
I think it was the best approach, honestly, because
Yeah.
he knew what he was getting into, and if he would try to test the limits, because this is what guys do, and tell me if I'm wrong, you're a guy, but guys test the limits with girls. They kind of go through mental hoops. Oh, I can get this far. Oh, I can do this. Oh, she just let me do this. Like, it's all about the boundaries that as a woman you're setting for the man, because again, you don't see women lining up at clubs to go and see men. You see men lining up at clubs to go and pursue
But
women.
men must do that for a woman too. Like both of you
Yeah.
guys have to have your boundaries established.
Right.
I would say this, that I've never
But
been one.
But men are more sexual. That's what I'm talking about in that sense. That women set boundaries even with anything like
Yes,
that. That's
yes.
what I was meaning.
And men, it's the drive for sex with men, I think, is much stronger than it is for women. And what I mean by that is, I got to be honest here. There's been times where like I set up a date when I was involved in hookup culture that would leave the door open to a potential hookup, right?
Yeah.
But I set it up that way, like I planned it that way, where
It was predetermined.
this is
It was
where
like predetermined thought.
this is where it could lead. I'm going to make it available where it could lead to that. In that moment,
Yeah.
I'm not being honest about that. Am I intentionally deceiving? I wouldn't say I'm necessarily being malevolent and deceiving, because it's not like I'm going to force her into that,
No,
right?
I think it goes back to the point that I was making of pushing your limits with somebody. And you will encounter a girl who will say, okay, or you'll see a girl that'll be like, no, I'm not going to give in to what you're trying to say.
I'm
And
not going home with you.
Yeah, I'm not going home with you. And it's much, I think, I'm not a man again, but I think it's much more attractive when a woman has that thing like, oh, look at the time. It's time for me to go home now. Like I want to go home. It's about 8.
If she
like,
tells
time
me
to get
no,
going.
if she tells me no, that means that she respects herself. And if she
Yeah.
respects herself, then I know that she can respect me.
It's-
And if
it's
she
not
can
like she's not
respect
putting
me,
out.
then she can respect others in the world too. And we can live
Right.
a honoring relationship ultimately.
Right.
So there's a lot of power in saying no. There's a lot of
yeah.
power in holding your boundary.
I think a lot of people have become people pleasers, and I myself fall into this category of, oh, I want to help this person or this or that. And a lot of girls, because our feminine nature is to care for others and is to help others and nurture, it's easy to try and fix that bad boy. It's easy to
Yeah.
fall for the bad boy and think he's going to change for me. When in reality, you only see that in younger women. You don't see that in older women, more mature women who've gone through the fray, to say it
They
like
learn
that.
their lesson.
They learn their lesson. It's like they fear for their future self because they've gone through that pain already. So if you've gone through that pain, you obviously don't want to have to deal with that again. But I think it goes back to parents teaching your children about what you went through personally, what were your personal struggles, which is why we're seeing a huge rise on podcasts. People love podcasts. They like seeing people who are being real in real time. They're talking to them about their experiences. And it's important to live vicariously, because that's the only way that you will be able to refrain from the hurt. You don't have to touch the hot stove to know that it's hot.
Right.
You just know. Whereas there are people, and this sadly, it is usually the most common derivative of type of person that needs to hit rock bottom. They need to hit that rock bottom and say, I don't like it here. I don't want to be here. I want to get out of here. How do I do it? But you've already, I don't know, anything that you do in life, you're just giving a piece of yourself. It all comes at a price. Anything that you're doing, if it's sexual, even if it's just like stealing, or whatever. You're giving a part of yourself, your dignity, the righteous purity that God has given you. You're giving that away, and it all comes with a trade. And people don't really see that in the moment. You see it down the road when you look back, and you see in hindsight, oh my gosh, why did I do that? And it comes with years of regret. It comes with years of shame, and it sucks, because you shouldn't have to feel ashamed if you were acting in a pure sense.
Do you think that women lose their value over time?
So economically speaking, like if she's searching for a husband, I think a woman can lose her value because it's in beauty. Guys just see girls because of their beauty. Obviously not all guys, but normally what a man sees first is, physicality. And it's sad. However, I don't think that mentally you're going to lose value if you hold yourself up to a standard, and you stick to your values and your morals. That's something much more beautiful internally. And again, we're not all meant for a relationship. We're not all meant to get married. And it's a bitter pill to swallow, because everybody wants that romantic relationship. Everybody wants to go home to somebody. But sometimes you're meant for other things. Your vocation is going to be something else, and it will be fulfilling. It just won't be as fulfilling that the way that you thought it was going to be. That comes back to God working in mystical ways in your life. I always think of God as the ultimate chess player. He's like looking down at the chessboard. He sees where all these pieces are moving, and he says, okay, we need to put this person here, we need to do this there, and you are just seeing it from the level playing field, where you can't see what's going on. So in that sense, I would say that women lose value if you're not really searching or pursuing a man with intention. Because if you see it through the years, women are mostly pursued in their younger 20s, 30s years, 18, like younger, let's say teens, 20s, 30s. And then you see a decline, even in hospices. Like you go to a hospice and there's like one man for every 50 women who's single. So it's really interesting. All the good men get taken, and all the women who didn't have the chance to grab onto a good man.
This perspective that seems really attractive to young women about hookup culture, especially in their early 20s, if they're involved in that, I always have this thought running through my mind. Like, you're 23 years old. You're 20, and I have this conversation with my oldest niece too. Is like, you're 22, 23 years old. And right now, culture is saying like, this is, you're so valuable, you're so pretty, and it's all based on your sexualization. It's all based on who you can sleep with and who you can attain and how many people you can attain. That's kind of the perspective of hookup culture, especially for women. And the problem is that yes, men are going out and doing the same thing. And I don't mean just to hit on women here, but I believe that a man can maintain his value. Like we said, the increased financially over time. A 40-year-old man is obviously making more than a 25-year-old man. But a man at 40 years old is still going to determine beauty as probably one of the number one factors of value for a woman. So he's naturally going to have the proclivity to go towards the younger woman who has maintained her beauty. But if that woman has consistently lived in the mindset of hookup culture, well, hookup culture is going to lead her down a road of sleeping with bad men that leads to her being bitter and resentful by 35 years old. And what 40-year-old man would choose to be with a bitter, resentful 35-year-old woman that every man has had the opportunity to sleep with? So,
but not only that, it's also what type of situations are you as a woman putting yourself into, and what type of situations are you putting yourself into as a man? Because then again, I go back to the desensitization of sex. Like if you as a guy think it's okay to go around sleeping with multiple women, and then you're like, oh, now I'm ready to sit down and settle my life. That takes a toll on your personality. It takes a toll on your mentality. It just takes a toll, period. So yes, I agree that women lose their value over time, even though I would say, look at the women nowadays who have taken care of themselves and who are still single, let's say in their 40s, and who said, okay, I'm not going to go to those parties. I'm not going to become an alcoholic. I'm not going to do drugs. You see my mom, she's like 57, but you see a picture of her, she looks 32. She looks really young.
That's awesome.
And it's because she's been taking care of herself. And a woman will take care of herself and will mature like fine wine, just like a man will, if she's not putting herself in those situations where she's getting used, abused. And same for men, because like I said, desensitization of sex. Guys are more prone to watching porn, are more prone to having sex with multiple women and saying, oh look, I've got all this money. And this is why a lot of the rich guys, the 0.1% of men who make like 200K plus are usually like Andrew Tate. I can have as many women as I want. That actually
And
shows that you're low value,
and
because
that's
you
a
can't
terrible
maintain one relationship.
and it's a terrible perspective to have that. Like,
Oh,
as
yeah.
a man, it's about how many women I can sleep with. No, dude, it's about like how you're fulfilling your purpose, how your purpose plays out in other people's lives, and how you influence people to be better in an honoring way. And if you're
Right.
encouraging them to dishonor themselves by going out and getting involved in hookup culture, knowing
Right.
the results of the emotions of the man, that because he's sleeping with all of these women, now he's not emotionally available for a good woman. Now, what type of good woman is going to want him at the end of the day when he's just emotionally distraught because he's been sleeping with all of these women? So it goes hand in hand.
It does. It goes both ways. It's not like a one-way street. It's two-way street. It's both men and women can lose their value if they're putting themselves in the wrong situations. Now, I strongly encourage anybody listening right now to look up the book Marry Him, Mr. Good Enough, because I love that book. I read it like twice and I was like, this is insane, because it was coming from a perspective of a woman who spoke to all these other women, and she was like, oh my gosh, I really screwed my life by going into hookup culture, by not seeking a relationship intentionally from the time that I was younger. Because most women who find a good relationship like in their teens or 20s end up marrying a really good guy, and they're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that I'm still married. Whereas in that book, there's certain women who talk about, for example, there's this one girl. She said, I was in college and I was dating the love of my life, and I just realized that he was the only guy I'd ever dated. I was dating him for about a year and a half, and I didn't really have any other guys before him, and he was like my first sexual experience. And we were very in love. He wanted to ask me to be his wife, and when he did, I said no, I need time to think about our relationship and whatever. And so they ended up breaking off and going separate ways. And years later, she's been partaking in hookup culture because society tells you that as a woman, if you're not participating in hookup culture, if you're not living this free love movement sort of thing, then what type of experience you're going to have when you're married? Like, oh, you need that experience. You need to first live with somebody to know what they're like. There's this huge push for people living with each other. And if you see it like statistically, you see that when people start living with each other
Before marriage.
that relationship doesn't end well. It declines over the years. It's like, oh my gosh, we hate each other. I don't like this person.
There's a higher percentage of divorce when you live together before marriage.
Before marriage.
So it is such a false perspective that you must live together before you get married.
And it's such a false perspective to go around having sex with as many people as you can, whether you're a man or a woman, to gain experience. Sex is probably the easiest thing that comes naturally to people. And you just go in a bedroom and you do it, and that's it.
Then the question is, why wouldn't you want to learn that with your wife? Why wouldn't you want to learn that with your husband?
I was leading up to that. I was like, why wouldn't you want to build something? This goes back to like marriage. Why wouldn't you want to build a fortune with your wife? So on my podcast, I talked about capstone marriages and cornerstone marriages. Capstone marriage is when somebody marries in their older age, like 30s, 40s. And capstones is when you marry in your teens or your 20s, whatever. Usually not in your teens nowadays, but before, like in years before, you would have people marrying at 19, 18, right? And so what the differences are, and a lot of guys say, I don't want to marry anybody because they're going to take my money, and then there's divorce. But if let's say you find, hypothetically, let's make up a person, this guy and this girl, they meet in college and they start dating, and then they date for a couple of, maybe let's say 2 years, which is the norm for people, even though, like, for example, Ben Shapiro dated his wife for about 2 months, proposed, got married after 6 months, and they're still going strong. And so let's say you dated with them for 2 years, and then you decide to get married, and you start building a wealth together. You build a family, you build a house, you build things together. You build like the perfect sexual interaction with each other. You build the love, you build all of these things together. As opposed to capstone marriages, I'm not saying anything against them. I think it's totally fine. You find love when you find love, and you find the right person that you're meant to be with when you find the right person you're meant to be with. But it's a lot harder to get out of your practiced ways, like your own habits, the things that you like, the things that you don't like, when you're seasoned, when you've already lived life and you've become a little jaded. You're like, oh, I'm not willing to compromise on these things. Whereas when you're younger, you're willing to compromise on certain things. So like, oh, this I don't really like this about my husband, but it's okay because he'll grow out of it. And then you see him grow out of it. You see him mature into a grown man rather than a child, right? Whereas if you're older, you're already stuck in your ways. It's a lot more difficult to change who you are as a person, like in your mid 30s, 40s, because you've already lived like this so long that you're like, why is this person going to come into my life and try and change everything? And then they're not going to compromise on anything. And this is where pride comes in. You both become prideful, and you go against each other rather than being one in a relationship and understanding that it's a team effort. You guys are in a team, and if you hurt her, you're hurting yourself, or if she hurts you, she's hurting herself. It's all about this team mentality, which is why I also encourage young girls and young guys to go into team sports and try and figure out like the purpose of a team sport. If you're just like a serial dater, if you're just a guy who can't be in a team, it's going to be really difficult for you to be in a relationship, because you're always going to want to be domineering, and it's always about compromising.
Like, do you want to go on the journey together? Or do you just want to do it on your own or be domineering over another person?
Because that's also like a selfish pursuit of it, right? If you're going to be domineering over somebody, it's manipulative, and you're just being selfish. And in this world, we tend to realize that living a selfless life is more fulfilling than just living on that self-love journey of, oh, I'm always going to love myself.
Right.
So how
but
does
what's preached, what's preached is all about self-indulgence. And that's problematic, because how are you available for a partner if you can't be selfless?
Right.
When you're so focused on yourself and you can't see the needs of others and live selflessly, what value do you add to them in their life when you're solely focused on you? See, and that's the reason why it's a totally demeaning perspective of self-love and self-gratification, and everything's all about you. Like, that's one thing that I found. Like, when I was depressed and when I was going through some hardships, I realized that a lot of this was internal indulgence and self-thought. And yeah, I can wake up every day and I can say, oh, I love myself. I love myself. I love myself. I love who I am, blah, 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 blah. But the reality is, you wouldn't have to here's what I found now. You wouldn't have to tell yourself that if you truly felt that way about yourself. You never have to say that.
Yeah.
Because you intrinsically feel that way about yourself.
Right. Like what are the things that you're participating in that make you feel like you're worthless? What are the things that you're not doing that could make you a better person? Those are the questions that you really have to ask yourself, right?
And the reason why it's selfish is because now I was unable to enjoy the moments with others and them enjoy my full participation in the relationship, because I was so focused on how I felt internally about myself. Yeah. And once I started to realize, well, what value do I add to them? Then when I had that question, it's like, oh, okay, so I'm a good friend because I can add value here. Maybe it's perspective of life. Maybe it's a conversation, or maybe it's just simple. The thing that all of us men need is encouragement. Maybe it's simply providing encouragement to my friends. Guess what? Because I was doing that, not from a selfish manner, but because I wanted what's best for them, I felt fulfilled in that relationship more than I could have ever experienced prior, when I just continually told myself, oh, I love myself, I love myself, I love myself. None of that was true, because I had to tell myself that. But when I started adding value to other people's lives, then I felt truly valued, and I didn't have to tell myself that anymore.
So my question is kind of like, what led you there? were there differences between like the nice guy or the simp situation? What was going on in that time of your life for you to react that way?
So March of 21, I went through a breakup with my ex-girlfriend. I've been single for 2 years. And at first, you know, you get this initial high after a breakup, at least I did, where I was like, yes, I'm free. I can talk to whoever I want. I can do anything I want. I don't have to worry about anybody. And then like 4 months into that, it hit me like, wow, you know, I'm almost 27 years old and I don't have anybody to share anything that I've built in my life with. And
Right.
I've always lived this idea of like, it's all about me all the time.
Yeah.
And then I started to like reflect internally and I became really hard on myself. Like, how did you end up in this place? And to gratify myself, I just continually spend money because that was the way that I was able to temporarily achieve temporary satisfaction or gratification. Right. And there were times when I'd just be like, man, life sucks, you know, and I'd be like laying in bed, curled up in a ball, crying, you know, whatever. Yeah. But it's true. And I was even contemplating my own life, you know, those harsh thoughts.
That's really tough. That's a really tough thing to go through. I think, how long were you guys together for?
We were only together for 9 months, but like I said, it was the build up to that moment.
It's a build up to that, for sure.
It was 3 failed relationships. The first one, she cheated on me. The second one, it was honestly just bad timing. She was a great woman, and I was focused on my business, and I became complacent in the relationship. So I recognize that. And then the third one was...
What do you mean by complacent?
I quit giving her the attention that she needed to feel validated in the relationship, that she truly felt valued by me. Instead, because I was that way... I hear the dog. But because I was that way, she didn't feel that I valued her the way I should have valued her. And so that led to the breakup. And then the third one was me living a lie, saying, I'm going to go to California with you, and me not talking about the values that I hold myself to in my life. And so throughout those 9 months, I'm living this lie because I'm just like extremely attracted to her. Honestly, that's what it was. The relationship for me was built on that. And the sad part is, at the time, I failed to recognize just how great of a woman she was. She was very emotionally mature, very mature mentally. And there were areas that I think that she could have grown on spiritually. But instead of me honing in on valuing her,
was wrong, yeah.
that made her great in who she was, I lied. I lied to myself, I lied to her, and I lived that out. And so there was just a buildup of 8 years, 9 years of living like this, you know. And then December of 21 hits me, and I go on these 2 calls at work. And the first call I go on, a guy ends up getting shot by one of my officers, and you know, it was a gunshot wound to the face. Now, he was justified because the guy was trying to run him over with a car. And I was right there, and the guy's like almost choking on blood, and we're holding up his head so that he doesn't choke on the blood. That way it drains down, you know. And then we end up taking him to the hospital and just like watching that whole situation work out.
Develop.
But and so that was a traumatic experience. But then like 1 to 2 weeks later, I respond to a call where a guy just calls. He says, hey, I'm going to kill myself. Click. And I show up at the hotel. And when I showed up, I knocked on the door. I identified myself. Boom. Another gunshot. Okay, look, I've been in law enforcement at this time for 3.5 years. I'd never experienced anything like this. Like 2 back-to-back. Now, that's wild. Look, only 10% of police officers are involved in a shooting at some point in their law enforcement career over a 20-year span. Only 10%.
That's a small number.
So it's a really small number. So now I'm thinking, why am I involved in 2 of these in a 2-week period back to back? And mind you, like I said, I'm in this depressed state as well, and I'm showing up to my work, you know, trying to tough all of it out. And I walk into that hotel room. Matrix is playing on the TV, and the background music is going. I look down at the bed. His wife is calling him. And then I look in the corner of the room. There's a shotgun in his lap and nothing left above his nose. And there's all this matter throughout the hotel room. And the instant thought for me was, man, I never want my mom or my friends or my family to find me like that, you know?
Yeah. It's interesting how God puts you in situations like that where you are able to realize, dang,
Yeah, it was
I'm gonna hurt people around me rather than just hurting myself. And it is, I hate to say this because there are so many people that go through these thoughts, but it is the coward's way out because you think, I'm just going to get rid of my life and that's it. No, you are going to inflict so much more damage on those who love you, because whether you love yourself or not, there's so many people who do care about you. There's so many people who value you, who think you are so amazing. And
Right.
to take yourself away from them is also something just incredibly selfish. And I'm so sorry you had to go through that. But I think it was like a moment of realization for you, and where you had to contemplate,
Now,
yeah,
I don't mean this in a bad way. Every negative action that happens in your life, you have a choice of how you
yeah.
perceive that, right? What do you take away from that situation? Now, me personally, this is my personal experience. Do I choose to live with the traumatic experience and PTSD from it or whatever? Me
Yeah.
personally, I felt that I had the mental fortitude to make that decision that I'm not going to live with that. I chose to look at it from a positive perspective. I think that there's light in darkness, but the only way that there's light in darkness is because of Jesus. And although there was all of that darkness, that's obviously all darkness, okay? Depression, these 2 calls, suicide, this and that. All of that is darkness. But what I pull from it is, wow. You know, I don't
it's
want
what you
to
make
be
out
like
of
that.
it. Yeah.
And so there was some meaning in that, right? So then I find meaning in that. So
It's the
all of this,
crossroads that we were talking about. It's the fork in the road.
yeah, and I have the decision to make. So what I chose was a positive outlook on it. I'm going to allow this situation to change my life for the better. And every day I'm going to wake up. I mean, it didn't just come this easy, but I'm going to wake up one day. I'm going to wake up every day with a purpose.
Yeah.
And so all of this stuff, all the bad stuff that happens isn't so damn hard because I have meaning. And I read a book called Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday, and that really kind of opened it up even further.
Right. I think I want to ask you about values then, because, purpose is part of your set of values. How important are values in a relationship to you?
You can't build a relationship with somebody who doesn't have similar values to you. Because if you think that you can instill the values in them, then that means that you potentially have to manipulate them to think and believe the way that you do. Values require us to communicate them to one another so that we both know where each other stand. And if we both know where each other stand, then we both know how we can attack life together and how we're going to react to the hardships that we're going to experience. So values are immensely important in relationships. And I think so many people set values aside and they say, well, he has this, all the tangible things, all those tangible things are benefits. But those aren't strongholds. That's not a foundation to build a relationship on. And when you base relationship on the tangible things, you miss the need, the intrinsic need within you emotionally, spiritually, and mentally of having a person that holds true to the same foundation as you. How are you going to build a house without a solid foundation? And
why it comes back to, equally yoked. But also think about like for example, for the guys, a beautiful model-esque woman who's gorgeous and has all the attributes you want. And for the women out there, think of a guy who's making all this money and he's taking all these yacht trips. What does that person matter if they don't have honesty, integrity, wisdom, loyalty, kindness, charity? If they're not respectful to you, if they're not courageous in your relationship, if they're not gracious, if they're not grateful to you, if they're not grateful to others, it's all about those values. And your non-negotiables can't be, oh, he has to make 100K every year. Your non-negotiables should be, he has to be compassionate, he has to be loving, he has, all these values are what form a long-term relationship, a long-term marriage. And I think every good relationship, any good relationship that you can see has all of these. If not all, they have most of these, where you can see the loyalty, you can see the integrity coming off in waves from the woman and the man, the honesty, the wisdom. Jordan Peterson, he always says, with my wife, when we got married, we promised to each other we would never lie. There's honesty.
Right.
There's abundance in
And
honesty.
and I love his perspective of this. He says, never in my 30 years of clinical practice, or however long it was, did anybody get away with a lie.
A lie. Yeah.
Lies
Never.
always come to light.
The sun,
Hiding
the sun shines for everybody, for sure.
And this is the reason why it's important to discuss your traumatic experiences, in my opinion, is because if you hide the trauma in the darkness, eventually it comes to light. And what form do you want it to come to light in? Do you want it to come to form in the light in anger, bitterness, and resentment, where it's even harder on you? Or do you want it to come to light in a way that's joyful and has meaning and provides hope for not just you, but others? You have to make that decision with a traumatic experience.
Right. And that's not to say like to go into a relationship and immediately bare yourself in front of them. That comes with time. That comes
Right.
with moments and vulnerability whenever you feel like you are able to share that with that person. Because again, these are traumatic experiences. These are things that you will have to share eventually, but also you don't. And I say this because a lot of guys will ask girls, they think it's okay to ask girls, like, what's your body count? What's your body count? Or girls asking guys, like, it's the same thing. It's like, man, are you going to marry me? Or is that what you're asking me? Like, because that's something so personal to one's relationship with the other person. And I think at that point, that's when you should come clean about anything that you've ever done. And it's not that it's going to be bad. It's going to be honesty coming through and coming to light. Which
The
is
other
why
thing is, don't ask questions that you don't want to know the answer to. If you ask the question, what's your body count? And you're going to be thrown off by 30 or 40 when you guys have been in a relationship for 3 or 4 years, and now you're going to hold that against him, don't ask that question.
Yeah, if you're going to hold that against her or him, it's like, why are you even doing that? What are you gaining from that? I think that's even a manipulative way of trying to find something over them so you can hold it over them when they fail in something. If they do something, oh well, that's because you slept with this amount of people. Well, that's because you did that.
For instance,
it's just a really aggressive and very, very weak way to approach anything like that.
For men, I think oftentimes the reason why we want a woman with a low body count is because it's like a level of innocence, I guess you could say. Like we're attracted to the innocence.
To innocence, and what does Satan want to do? He wants to defile innocence. That's why we're seeing like this huge amount of deaths and infanticide. Infanticide, abortion. What is abortion? It's the killing of a child, the most pure, the utmost pure. So I understand that completely, but then again, you have to understand that each person comes with trauma. Each person is going to have gone through a different set of life experiences that you will have no knowledge of. And you cannot hold that over them either, because you are no better than them, which is why, Christianity renews people. It's so beautiful it's beautiful, but also at the same time, kind of frustrating to imagine, let's say, I don't know, like Nancy Pelosi. If Nancy Pelosi was to give her life to Christ, I'm like, oh my gosh, that woman's done so many evil things. But then again, my sin is not lessened because of her sin. We're all the same in sin, and we are all renewed in Christ. So there's a beauty to that. And once you understand that you're with in relationship, in the relationship way, that you're with somebody who's been saved by Christ, you're with somebody who's a child of God, it changes that perspective immediately. You're no longer fighting against them. You're no longer trying to compete against them. And that's why it's also interesting watching how people move on from relationships. For example, you said the first couple weeks you were really excited. You were like, oh yeah, I get. And women, the difference with women is that women will go through that phase, like they're crying their eyes out the first couple months, and then later on they start moving on from it. Whereas guys, they start thinking about it more, and they're like,
what I've also found, I mean, the last 2 relationships was she had already given up before the relationship ended. She had already made that like mind change. Like she's been struggling
in her mind.
Yeah. For instance, my second relationship, she was like going through like all these thoughts. He doesn't feel good. He doesn't love me. He doesn't respect me. He doesn't do this because I'm complacent in the relationship. And so when she left, she had already made that decision, right?
Right, but it's also a lack of communication, because a lot of people will project, I've noticed myself doing this like in any minor fight or something. I'm like, but I feel like you don't care about me. I feel like this and that, right? But it's a feeling. You're feeling that way. It doesn't mean that person is actually doing that. So there has to be a conversation about it. And there definitely has to be a certain awakening moment where you both sit down and there's no yelling, there's no screaming. You both come to each other as idiots. You know that you both messed up. There's
I like that.
You didn't gain any, she didn't gain any. You both messed up. You're both losers, and you come to a compromise or to an agreement through the understanding that you both messed up. And that's where the common ground is sometimes.
So through this conversation that now we've had for an hour and 40 minutes, I think,
let's be honest, your camera did mess us up. So
yeah, I know. We had to get back on track, and I think that we did a good job. But I think the number one thing that somebody can pull away from the conversation that we just had is that like truly being valuable comes from being intentional in every aspect of life.
It comes from being open to the possibility of all the good things out there as well. I think it's protecting yourself from becoming a cynic, because giving into the cynical thought process is really easy. I've seen a lot of girls do this. They rationalize the reasons why they're going
negative
to have sex
emotion
with everybody. And they'll rationalize it with, oh, but that's what everybody calls me. Everybody calls me a slut anyway, so I'm just going to become that, And that's the cynic. That's the cynic in women. And there's a cynic in men that says, oh, all women are just looking for me and my money and da 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 da. And it's the same thing. You have to be open to the hopeful, pure responsibility of being with somebody, and you have to hold yourself to that too. It's not just looking for a woman who has a low body count. You have to become pure in that sense too. Right. You have to purify yourself with the armor of God. You have to purify yourself with anything that you're doing, any experience that you're having, anything at all. You have to take that on you, because again, the choice is yours. You come to a crossroads. There are certain things that you've been given that you can't change. You can't really change your eye color. You can't change your height. You can't do this. You can't do that. There are things that you can change. There are things that if you feel like you're too thin or whatever, you can work on yourself. You can work on that body mass. If you feel like you're dumb, like go read a book, pick up pick up some books, go study something that you find interesting, pick up some hobbies. So it really falls down on your decisions as a man or a woman to become high value, because we all have that potential.
Potential is always there. It's the action that you take to get there. Again, intentional. Be honest, be respectful, not only to yourself, your image, and others. If you're not, then you will be perceived as somebody who is not wanted. And again, if you possess those things, you become a person of scarcity. And a person of scarcity is a person of higher value than others. Okay? Yeah. And that's always subjective. Always subjective on what I perceive, right? If I think a woman's high value, another man may not think she's high value.
Right.
But
It's all
but
it's all
she
that perspective for sure.
right, but she has to be the person that she truly is and not living for everybody else. But this is the reason why foundation of the values is so important, is because in that is her relationship with Jesus, or for an atheist, her relationship with her morality, I guess, because that's a whole nother conversation. But
Right. That is, but I was going to say, like, hold true to your values and your morals, because if you're giving in of your values and your morals to other people, really, who are you? That's what you have to question yourself whenever you're trading a value for spending time with somebody that you like, or whatever. Who are you without your values, without your morals? Who are you truly? And what does that say to those around you?
right.
I think that's a good note that we should leave it off on.
Yeah. We got to do another one.
We do. We're gonna be each other's guests on each other's podcasts. How's that?
Honestly, I could do this probably every other week, to be honest.
Hey, it was a really good conversation. Like, seriously, I enjoy having fruitful conversations with people who are common sense, and I think it's the silent majority that have common sense. They're just not as loud as the as the oddities out there that are just always screaming about, wake up, and they go to Twitter and they complain. I think it's the silent majority that do feel this way, and that do sympathize and empathize with it.
So what, just in closing, what is your platform all about? The Dear Lovers XO podcast. What is it all about, and what value does it add to a new listener?
Well, the Dear Lovers podcast is all about finding a way to be intentional with a relationship. So, what I studied was, I'm a certified life coach and a relationship coach, and I have clients. And so, what we do is we try and figure out the way to really deal in this world of depression romantically, but not only romantically, but in family wise. And we study the four types of love in Greek love, so eros, philia, agape, and storge, and the difference between them. We have a lot of these interesting conversations on there, and in fact, I have a whole list of people that I'm excited to get on to talk about how they deal in their day-to-day life with Christianity, or even if you're not religious, because most of what I believe is shown through the worldview that I have, which is through the lenses of Christianity and my relationship with God. So I give my commentary on that from that perspective.
Same here. Everything's done with a Christian worldview on my end.
I guess I try to do. It's funny because a lot of people use this. They say, I want you to be the best version of yourself. And it sounds so corny, but that's all I've ever really wanted to do with people, was help them become their best version of themselves, because I am on that road, as a fellow journeyman. I'm on that road as well, of becoming the best version of myself. And it's a constant battle. We have our sin nature that we're constantly dealing with, giving into that or not giving into that. And that's what the whole battle is about. It's about fighting Satan, who's just trying to get at you from all these different places: depression, anxiety, suicide, everything that is bad, that is darkness, is him. And you have to be extremely careful with the things that you support, the things that you believe in, the things that you listen to, the things that you say to yourself. And I think I've struggled with that, my fair share, and a lot of people who I've had on the podcast and who I will be having on the podcast have struggled with that. So that's what I'm just trying to give other people, like, some type of closure through those conversations.
Well, if you guys would, make sure you subscribe to the Dear Lovers XO podcast on YouTube. Go check her out on Apple Podcast and Spotify. Leave ratings and reviews there. Do it for the Pursuing Truth podcast as well. Extremely important that we get feedback from you guys. Lets us know some direction of what is something that you need. What are some questions that you have? If you want to do something similar to what Juliana and I are doing, ask us some questions. I'm sure Julianne, I know she's been very reciprocal in communication with me. I'm sure she will be with you as well, because we're here to help you along your journey of life, because like she said, we are journeymen as well. So you guys have a great rest of your week, and God bless.